Ah, right. Um, Action. Roll the titles.
Unit online. Stand by. That's a big Twinkie. That's a big Twinkie.
Yeah, I think what we'll do this week is, like I said, let's talk about the history of Ghostbusters, where it started, how it become this bigger phenomenon, how you get to the Ghostbusters community, where you get fans, you get hardcore fans, you get young fans nowadays who's dressing up as their favorite Ghostbuster. You see Ghostbusters at conventions, you see Ghostbusters exhibiting at conventions, self-made props from the film, the cartoon series, the comic books. Yeah, so how it happened is Dan Aykroyd has always been fascinated with the paranormal, all the weird stuff. Like, well, I think it dates back to his family history of like psychics and everything to do with the paranormal, like ghosts and sightings and aliens, and you got the myths, you got the true believers, you got your I want to see evidence before I believe in ghosts. Really? Didn't you used to watch Casper? Come on, hint hint. Um, yeah. So if I'm right, Dan's always been interested in like the paranormal side and psychokinesis and stuff like that. Yeah, I think he started to write the script for Ghostbusters back in '81, but it wasn't entitled Ghostbusters. He had it down as Ghost Smashers, and he already had a director in mind. He already had his co-star, which is obviously John Belushi, one of his best friends, who starred with him in like obviously the famous Blues Brothers. Obviously he had his director. Already had his director in mind, which was Ivan Reitman, which some of you might know from a certain film we're talking about. If you haven't heard of Ivan Reitman, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah, so he had this idea of like a time travel-esque science fiction kind of film where you got him and John bouncing through time and space, capturing ghosts, trapping ghosts. Obviously, it was in like the writing stages because, like I said, it was nicknamed Ghost Smashers. But then in 1982, tragedy struck when John Belushi was found dead. And no, I'm not going to reiterate what he died of. He was a great actor. Well, you see from Blues Brothers, Animal House. So then, like, they decided to carry on the project of Ghost Smashers, but then Ivan Reitman, he liked the film, but he thought it needed a bit tweaking, a lot of tweaking if you want to get away from like time travel ghost capturers. Which you think about saying that was a bit like part in Doctor Who, Army of Ghosts episode season 2, where the world thought ghosts were coming back, and then the Doctor goes with Rose back in the TARDIS and gets his like ghosts like capturing equipment, and you also see him in that episode talk about you got to go Ghostbusters from Rose. Yeah, so you really get time travel ghost capture there. Yeah, so Ivan wanted to bring in another person to help Dan rewrite the script and get like polished in one way. So, and I think he thought they could get away from the space time travel genre. So yeah, so I apologise for the noise in the background. It's the puppy. Yeah, so then he brought on board Harold Ramis, as we all know from Stripes and that. Okay, I'm not getting it. We all know who Harold Ramis is. I'm not going to get into who Harold Ramis is because we know who he is. Everyone knows who Harold Ramis is. Yeah, top down rewrite the script. In one way, glad they done it, obviously, because otherwise you want to go Ghostbusters. You put, but yes, so they rewrote the script, and instead of at space, time travel, sci-fi genre, they brought it back down to Earth as like a three men at work looking to start their own business. So they decided on a parapsychologist. So they wrote the script. They got the go ahead from the studio, but then they couldn't come to thing on the name because they come up with Ghostbusters, but they couldn't really use the Ghostbusters due to it being at that time copyrighted to Filmation, because in the 1970s you had a live action TV series entitled Ghostbusters where they had a chimp. And obviously in the 1980s they also brought back the cartoon based on the live action. So that's how comes. Well, obviously that's comes when you got the real Ghostbusters. That's why you added the real onto it. But talking about real Ghostbusters at the moment, let's just shift a little bit. This year's the 40th anniversary. So hence why I've got merchandise of the real Ghostbusters. Yeah, and then they come up with all different names, just in case they couldn't get the name of Ghostbusters. Come up with Ghost, obviously Ghost Smashers again, Ghost Blasters, etc. And yes, so they went along that. Obviously, they decided on the cast members. See, originally, in the end, you had Rick Moranis and you had Ernie Hudson playing Winston Zeddemore and Lewis Tully, but in the original, they wanted they didn't want Ernie Hudson. They wanted they wanted Eddie Murphy. Obviously, because of his background with Dan Aykroyd in the film earlier, Trading Places. So Eddie Murphy had to turn it down because it was either Ghostbusters or Beverly Hills Cop. And me personally, I'm glad Eddie Murphy turned it down, because otherwise you wouldn't have got Beverly Hills Cop. And in fairness, I don't think Eddie would have fitted into the Winston role, just like Ernie Hudson has. Yeah, and then for the role of Lewis Tully, you basically had the wonderful he's one of my favourite actors, always has been, John Candy. You might know him from Summer Rental, Spaceballs, Uncle Buck, which Uncle Buck, and then you had The Great Outdoors, which was John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. But then John Candy got a bit thingy towards the film. He wanted to change like Lewis Tully's whole like personality, and he wanted to give him an accent. I don't think that works for like the studio or that, or what that Dan and Harold had in mind, or even Ivan. So, out of due respect, they had to replace him, and luckily, they replaced him with Rick Moranis. Um, Obviously, Rick Moranis, fantastic actor. See, if you look at the different connections of like actors starring together and after Ghostbusters or before Ghostbusters, like before Ghostbusters, obviously you had like Ivan Reitman, with like Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, John Candy, like you had it in Stripes. Then you had like Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd in Trading Places. You had John Candy and Rick Moranis in Spaceballs. I know that was after Ghostbusters. I'm just a big fan of Mel Brooks anyway. Yeah, and then obviously you had Dan Aykroyd and John Candy in The Great Outdoors. But then you also had in Little Shop of Horrors, when Bill retired after Ghostbusters, because it became this big thing, he'd done his little cameo in Little Shop of Horrors, which was Rick Moranis. So you just had all this like where actors start together and this that before and after Ghostbusters. It's like another one I don't think you many people remember. Annie Potts starred with John Candy. Yeah, Annie Potts starred with John Candy in Who's Harry Crumb. So it's just like, even though John Candy wasn't for the role of like Lewis Tully, he still went on to actually appear in something Ghostbusters. It was in the Ray Parker Jr.'s music video for Ghostbusters. John Candy's in it. Yeah. Ghostbusters. Obviously that music video, you had like Peter Falk, which is Columbo. You had Chevy Chase. It's like I said, back then you had all different Ghostbusters like music videos. You had music video for On Our Own for Ghostbusters 2. But we talk about later in later episodes about the music and different films and that. But anyway, going back to Ghostbusters. Yeah, so obviously because Dan couldn't have John Belushi, obviously the cast consisted of Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett, Rick Moranis as Lewis Tully, Ernie Hudson and Winston Zeddemore, Your Honor. Harold Ramis starred in his own film, as Egon Spengler. Then you had Dan Aykroyd starring in one of his own films as Ray Stantz, and then they got in Bill Murray, obviously to play Pete Venkman, which was in theory intended for John Belushi. So, but this is the thing. When you put, and like I said, they're also going at Annie Potts as Janine, William Atherton as Walter Peck. Walter Peck has gone down as one of the top villains. Where if you think about something with Walter Peck, he was only doing his job. That's all he was doing. He was being a dick about it, but he was just doing his job. But see, that's what I'm saying. If you put this whole cast together, like look, you've Annie Potts, Sigourney Weaver, Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, Rick Moranis, William Atherton. You put all them together, and it's directed by Ivan Reitman, which back then he done a lot of great comedy films. You see, I don't think Ghostbusters would have worked with, say, a cast of John Candy, Eddie Murphy, John Belushi, Harold Ramis. I don't think it would have worked. It really wouldn't have done. See, don't get me wrong. Um, I like John Belushi. I love John Candy, but I don't think that would have been the right fit for John Candy. I don't think Ghostbusters would have been a right fit for John Belushi. See, if you take the cast, they made each character their own. It's like when you see Annie Potts now, you think of Janine from Ghostbusters. Sigourney Weaver, it's Ghostbusters, even though she's starring in the new Star Wars movie. And she also had a bit of fame from the Aliens, but she made Dana that role. She always been known as Dana Barrett, Zool from Ghostbusters, like Rick Moranis. Rick Moranis made Lewis Tully. Lewis Tully was probably only like a little role. If you saw, he was Dana's neighbour. And obviously his neighbour, and he turned into a terror dog. And obviously in Ghostbusters 2, he was a lawyer because he got it in night school. And then he became a Ghostbusters like Canton. Obviously he didn't show up for after like Frozen Empire due to him being retired. You had, like I said, Annie Potts with like young Sheldon and stuff like that, and then you had Ernie Hudson. I don't think Ernie Hudson has had more of an impact than, because you think of Ernie Hudson, he's Winston Zeddemore. He's a Ghostbuster. That's what he is. Where Harold Ramis, yes, you look, and he's Egon. He's Egon Spengler. He didn't really. Yes, he was like a director in that, like Groundhog Day and stuff like that. But and he had a big part as a doctor in Groundhog Day. We interacted with Bill Murray. But that's the thing. Harold Ramis wasn't one of these massive like actors afterwards or that or before it. But the role of Egon, that's Harold. That is Harold. You see him, it's Egon. It's a bit like Bill Murray. Bill Murray had like, see, I'd say a partially successful acting career. Obviously, after Ghostbusters, he was in Scrooged, which was brilliant. Then he had like other parts, like what about Bob and, like I said, Groundhog Day. He had a zombie. See, that's the thing. But if you see Bill Murray, he's Peter Venkman. He's Ghostbusters. If you see him, you want him for Ghostbusters. But then you've got Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd, yes, he's Ghostbusters. Yes, he's Ray Stantz. Yes, we know the history. But you know, he had some like wicked films like Coneheads, Spies Like Us with Chevy Chase, and obviously he had the bit part in Casper where he was Ray again, and he come down the stairs. Are you gonna call someone else? And then I'm not sure, but I think they've made Casper canon to the Ghostbuster world now. But that's what I'm saying about the impact of Ghostbusters and the cast that Dan and that chose. And Ivan, it's like, that is a cast for a film that spanned over 40 years. They can't go without thinking about that Pacific movie. But when you've got Ghostbusters, I'm just glad that they managed to get the rights to the name, because I don't think it would have had more of a thing like, yeah, look at me, I'm a ghost blaster or I'm a ghost smasher. It's Ghostbusters. You bust ghosts. It's Ghostbusters. It's Ghostbusters. Um, but it's just the impact that the movie had, where 1984, you didn't have that many like great like comedy horror genre. Like you had 1984, you had Better Cop, obviously Eddie Murphy, but it was brilliant. But not 1984, you had like, I think you had Gremlins. Yeah, Gremlins was 1984. Gremlins, another fantastic movie. But yeah, so if Dan and Harold then rewrite the script and make it three parapsychologists who started their own business, you got to think is, if fate had it and John didn't pass away, what would Ghost Smashers go down as like a B movie? Would it go down as one of those films that you go, oh, Ghost Smashers, I remember that, I think. You see what I mean? But the mention of Ghostbusters, because it had the cast, it had the right elements. This is the thing. It also had that one iconic symbol, the Moogly. If it wasn't for that sign, I mean, when I was promoted, it went across bus stops and billboards and everything. First of all, people didn't know what to expect. But then Ghostbusters just blew up. It just blew up from the one concept that Dan Aykroyd had. Harold Ramis, in other words, tweaked it with him. Then they got the brilliant cast. And it's still going today with the fandom, where you got cosplayers, you got prop builders, you got people who say, I remember that when I was a kid. I remember I played with that when I was a kid. And then, what are you from that saying? It's got to the point with the Buffalo Ghostbusters, where they've started to do Ghostbusters Day. When I made it, it's just like a fanfare thing outside a Ladder 8, the firehouse in New York in Tribeca, where every year now, I think it started on the 40th. Like I think that's when it exploded. You get fans from all around the world just want to be there on that day, on Ghostbusters Day, June 6th. See, that's what I'm saying. This shit. It's the third one for me, third one for them. June 6th. Everyone. See, not everyone, but people travel from all around the world to be there, to just experience it and catch up and actually, yes, I was there. Yes, I did this. Yes, I did that. And the whole day was just brilliant. But that's the thing. I know I keep saying it, but if you didn't have Harold Ramis and that, we tweak it. We wouldn't have got Ghostbusters. We wouldn't even got the cartoon. But yeah, so anyway, what? Sorry, just getting emotional over Harold. Yeah, so obviously, as you can see, I've got real Ghostbusters stuff spread about the place. The naughty mini puffs are going at it again. But yeah, so let's thingy. So Ghostbusters 40 years, real Ghostbusters, the cartoon. I'll get into real Ghostbusters in another podcast. Just wanted to preview. This is just little bits. Yeah, just need to remind people of the competition that's still running for the rare limited edition RCA Video Shop promotional jacket. I'm not closing the competition yet. I'm still leaving it open. But if you check out me social media, then I'm gonna have this big presentation up. Sorry, I have this big presentation up about the jacket and what it looks like. Obviously, you go on the post on the Road Ghostbusters UK. You like and subscribe to either platform, the Facebook group, TikTok group, or the YouTube channel. I'm on linked now. The podcast is available on Amazon, Apple, Spotify. The videos on YouTube. I just want to say thanks to everyone who has subscribed, who has viewed it. At the moment, our second episode is over 500 views, and that is amazing. I didn't expect that. Didn't expect over 500 views. I have no idea, but it's there. We've had 500 views on the second episode. Let's see if we can top that with this one. Obviously, I've got merchandise. Got the podcast hat. We've got obviously spread around. We've got the podcast stickers. If anyone wants any stickers, then contact me. I'll gladly send them to you. In the UK, they're free, but obviously, we all know that postal rates for the UK to the US. We'll have stickers on Ghostbusters Day. Find me, I'll give you a sticker. I've got patches coming. You can either purchase them off of me, or I can post them to you if you're in the US. Or if you're in the US, I'll have them with me on Ghostbusters Day. I'll be trading. So I hope you like listening to my podcast. If there's anything you think I can change, please give me feedback. I like doing it. Obviously, it's a weekly thing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go now. Anyway, remember to like and subscribe.